Tell you what, times really were good in the 1920s, weren't they? But as the expression goes, all good things must come to an end. And they do with the Great Depression. Let me just paint the picture before the market all fell apart. You see, this is a nice little graph showing us the market, the stock market, as measured by the Dow Jones Industrial in the 1920s. And man, this thing just, yeah, give me my cursor. Here we go. It's just going up. It's like a roller coaster. And as you know, roller coasters just keep going up. They never, oh, sometimes they do go down. And this one will. But let's stay on pre-crash. What's going on here? Well, I'll tell you what's going on. There is an excessive amount of consumer goods that people are buying on credit that is driving up the price of the refrigerator man, the washing machine guy, even the Ford company, right? Companies are a little too overvalued and people keep buying stock in them because they keep going up. Now, they want to make money. Everybody wants to make money. What they say is that if I buy a stock in a company, I'll wait for it to rise, and then I will sell, and then I will make money. At this point, 1 in 10 Americans is quote unquote playing the stock market. That's a lot of Americans to be playing the stock market. Now, the biggest problem is many people thought, hey, if I put in $1, get a loan for a little bit more, get a loan for like $9, so now I can put $10 in. When it jumps up to $11, I will sell, pay those $9 back, and I can keep my $2. Now that sounds nice and innocent. The problem is people were dealing with hundreds of thousands of dollars at times doing this. So there's all this credit, all this loans, buy, 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 buy. Companies are overvalued. And right about here, right there, is when some people start saying, they're really smart investors, they say, gosh, I think things might be a little bit overvalued. And they started selling. And once they sold, other investors panicked and started selling in large numbers, giving us that. Now, the absolute collapse of the stock market happens in the fall of 1929, but the worst day was October 29th, 29. That was Black Tuesday. Between 10 and 15 million dollars. No, excuse me. Between 10 and 15 billion dollars to the B. I was like, that doesn't sound right. Billion, B, a lot of money. Gone in one day. The stock market falls for many reasons, which we're going to go over. But understand, with all that selling, it was people panicking because they started to see selling going on. All right, let's get a couple things straight. The stock market crash is not the Great Depression. They are two different things. There are causes of the stock market crash, and there are causes of the Great Depression. But they are related. So I know this is going to get complicated, but let's go. What were the causes of the crash? Well, the biggest one probably is overspeculation. That's exactly what I was just telling you. People who thought the market will always go up. Overspeculation means you are betting on that market to rise. You don't ever think about the chance, the risk of it falling apart. And so you feel confident to put all your money in thinking it will always go up. That's overspeculation. Now, let's go back to one thing. Another thing about overspeculation is people buying on margin. Because they thought it was always going to go up, they took out loans. The example I gave you about the $9, that is buying on margin. That is too much credit. Credit was going into the market. Credit was also used to buy all those things from the 1920s, the consumerism, right? So when it all falls apart, you don't just lose your money, you lose whoever you borrowed from. Okay? Now, causes of the crash were also the banks. Because some people were saying, hey, I'm not going to play the market, that's risky. They put their money into banks, hoping the banks wouldn't put the money into the stock market. They did put money into the stock market. So when the market fell apart, so did the banks. The banks lost all of the money they put into the market, or pretty much all of the money they put into the market. So now, my honest dude who put his money in there isn't any money for him to get because they invested in the market. Now, banks are going to be more important later. We'll talk about that in a bit, okay? And then, so those are our big ones. For causes of the crash, over speculation, banks that invested the money into the market and lost it, and then too much credit, buying on credit, buying on margin. Okay. Now, bankruptcies are going to be very, very important as well. Businesses are going to fail and they're going to go out of business. So there you go. Okay, now let's shift. Let's go to the causes of the Great Depression. This is the bigger deal. Here's the fun part. Causes of the Great Depression is the stock market crash, one of them. Stock market crash happens and boom, we're shooting ourselves right towards the Great Depression. So the stock market crash has that effect on the Great Depression. All right, Spice, get more in depth. Okay, I will. Federal Reserve makes 3 mistakes. First, before the crash, back in the 20s, interest rates were really, really low. That caused all the credit to be happening. People were borrowing money and they couldn't afford it. People will go back to the Federal Reserve. Now, it's easy for us in 2013 to say, hey, Federal Reserve, man, you guys really screwed up. But at that time, you could say, hey, they shouldn't have had rates that low. There was too much credit. That's mistake 1. Mistake 2, when the banks started failing, because the banks screwed up too, they could have floated money, floated funds, and bailed out the banks to keep them afloat. They didn't. As a result, the banks went away. And when they went away, they never came back, the ones that failed. That meant if, let's say I want to start a business, I can't start my business because I can't get my loan from the bank. And now I can't employ people who were unemployed because of the Depression. So many people say, hey, Federal Reserve should have bailed those banks out. I said 3 mistakes, right? So the last mistake is during the Great Depression, they wanted to fix that mistake they made with low interest rates. So they raised interest rates, which was not a good idea during a depression because that meant that the money supply had been shrunk. People couldn't go out and get the loans they needed to start their business. The key to the Federal Reserve is they lessened the money supply, shrunk the money supply by letting banks go out and by raising those interest rates, okay? There's one bad thing. Here's another bad thing. It's going to be the Federal Reserve also messing around with protective tariffs, okay? The tariff that is most important we got to know about is the Hawley-Smoot tariff. And what it does is says, here's the idea of the Hawley-Smoot tariff. Let me get an example. All right, 2 things you could write with. Red, America, right? Blue, I don't know, France. That's one of their flag colors. Let's say we're both in the market for pens. At this time, many people thought that the European stuff was a little bit cheaper. So that meant my poor American guy with his high price isn't selling anything. What can you do? You could put a tariff, a protective tariff to protect American manufacturing. Tariff is a tax. Tax goes up. Now this thing's higher. People are buying that one, right? Problem solved? Problem not solved. Because those European countries, they did not like the Hawley-Smoot tariffs. They had retaliatory tariffs, which were their own tariffs on our goods. So now all of our farmers in here, they did not sell much stuff overseas like they needed to because they couldn't beat the tariffs that were put on them. So the result of the Hawley-Smoot tariff and of all the tariffs of this time is that exports decrease, exports go down. Now, while this is happening, we also have a Dust Bowl that came our way. Ooh, this is bad. Here's a problem with the Dust Bowl. Farmers in the Great Plains overproduced. They grew too many crops. When you grow too much stuff, you have a high supply, and at this time, demand was low. That meant their prices went down. So many of them decided, hey, I can't make money doing this. The prices are low. I'm done being a farmer. So they left the farm. They did not replant any grass over the land that they farmed. So it's kind of dirt, kind of dusty, okay? Normally, that shouldn't be a problem. It was a problem because of severe drought that struck during the 20s and into the 30s. All this drought combined with wind brought all of that dust into the atmosphere and created an unbelievable scene. This looks like a tornado or a bomb that went off. That's all dirt in the air. And this was happening all over the Great Plains. So overproduction is the problem. And farms are destroyed. So farmers that were having a hard time during the Depression anyway had to deal with the Dust Bowl. Okay? Many migrate away from the Great Plains, leave the Great Plains as a result. All right, what's the impact on Americans? Last slide, guys. Impact of the Great Depression on Americans. Well, the first thing is high unemployment rates. Okay, 25% of Americans were unemployed. Right now, unemployment floats somewhere in the 8% range, which is very high for our country currently. That ain't nothing compared to 25% unemployed. Boom. Number of people are homeless. This is a very famous picture of a woman who was homeless at the time with her 3 kids, assuming to be unemployed. They lived in shacks of communities called Hoovervilles, which was a shot at Herbert Hoover, who was blamed for not doing enough to help Americans at the time, right? So they're unemployed, they're homeless. Now, also, a horrible thing that's happening is the collapse of the financial systems. Banks are going out. Ooh, one thing I should have been more talked about, I'll talk about it right now, were runs on the bank. People feared that their money was gone, so they all went to the bank and said, hey, give me my money, give me my money. But a bank cannot do that all at once because banks' money is in many different places. That caused many banks to collapse. People lost faith in the banking system, meaning they did not invest their money into the banks, which meant I can't get the loan that I was going to use to hire other people. So, she doesn't look too happy with the bank system there as well, okay? The demand for goods goes down because people don't have disposable income, all right? Also, totally different, totally important though, is the change in labor unions. Labor unions are being impacted by this as well because everybody's being impacted. And they take on a militant attitude, right? This is greater militancy of labor unions. They're more aggressive. They use techniques like sit-down strikes. It's not like you leave and protest. You stay in to shut down the employer's business. Now, employers sometimes would use, in one case, they used tear gas to get the sit-down strike over. So you see the battle is heightening up. There's greater militancy of labor unions. Last thing, farm foreclosures and migration. People are losing their businesses, losing their farms, and they are leaving. Not a good time in American history. Herbert Hoover is going to be gone. He's going to be replaced by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Roosevelt's going to try his best to fix the Great Depression. Let's talk about that in the next chapter.